The day my grandmother's will was read felt less like a family gathering and more like the opening act of a cruel play. I had grown up knowing Matilda Blackwood as a formidable woman, sharp as steel, colder than stone, and impossibly untouchable. She built an empire with her mind, not her heart. And I, her quiet, artistic granddaughter drowning in student debt, had never been the kind of heir she valued. My Aunt Brenda and Uncle Marcus, on the other hand, were her chosen shadows, greedy and ambitious, cut from the fabric she seemed to admire. When the lawyer summoned us to his office, I went expecting nothing. The room smelled of leather and old wood, lined with towering books that made me feel even smaller in my secondhand clothes. My relatives sat across from me in tailored black, wearing masks of grief that could barely conceal their anticipation. Marcus tapped his pen like he was already signing checks. Brenda dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though her mouth twitched with suppressed excitement. The lawyer began with formalities, donations to charities, minor bequests, and then his voice sharpened when he reached the heart of it, the Blackwood fortune, rumored to be worth tens of millions, the entirety of my remaining estate, including all properties, stocks, bonds, and liquid assets. I leave to my beloved granddaughter, Cora. The air vanished from the room. I sat frozen, my mind blank, while Marcus and Brenda's faces cracked into grotesque masks of shock. Their victory parade had been cut short with one sentence. But before I could breathe, the lawyer cleared his throat. However, he said, "There is a condition." Their smiles returned like wolves circling prey. To claim the inheritance, I would have to live for 30 consecutive days inside Blackwood Manor, my grandmother's long-abandoned country estate. No money, no phone, no outside help, only the clothes on my back and whatever I could find within the property. My aunt and uncle were appointed as official monitors, permitted to check weekly to confirm my compliance. If I failed or quit, everything reverted to them. The will was not a gift, it was a test, one designed to humiliate me. My grandmother had always considered me weak, and now she had thrown me into what looked like a carefully crafted punishment. By late afternoon, the lawyer drove me deep into the countryside, leaving me at the foot of the estate's rusted iron gates. They groaned shut behind me with a sound like a prison door. Ahead, Blackwood Manor rose against the gray sky, a dark Gothic husk of the home I dimly remembered as a child. The windows were boarded, the gardens overrun, the paint flaking away like rotted skin. Cold rain began to fall as I pushed open the heavy oak doors, stepping into an airless tomb of dust and silence. My first night inside was misery distilled. The electricity was dead, the water a rusty trickle before sputtering out entirely. I found thin linens, a few half-burned candles, but nothing to chase away the bone-deep chill, wrapped in a torn velvet curtain. I huddled on a sheet-covered sofa while the house groaned and whispered around me. The wind wailed through cracks. Floorboards creaked under unseen weight, and vermin scuttled in the walls. Hunger gnawed at me, and despair pressed heavier than the darkness. By dawn, I had decided to quit. But then morning light streamed through the tall, grimy windows, painting the dust motes gold. The manor, stripped of shadows, no longer seemed like a monster but an old, wounded giant. My stomach's protests drove me to search again, this time with purpose. In the pantry, nearly empty shelves mocked me until I spotted, high at the back, a jar of peaches, sealed and glowing with amber syrup. Beside it sat a can opener, untouched by rust. With trembling hands, I wrestled the lid open and ate like a starving child. The taste was sunlight and memory, sweet and alive. In that moment, I knew it wasn't luck. My grandmother was too deliberate for chance. This was a clue, a message. The house wasn't just a prison, it was a puzzle. With that revelation, survival became exploration. I searched each room, not as a scavenger but as an archaeologist. The manor revealed itself as a time capsule of Matilda Blackwood's hidden self. In her study, behind rows of stiff volumes on finance, I found a hollowed-out book that triggered a hidden latch. A section of the bookshelf swung inward to reveal a secret study. There, on a carved wooden desk, lay a leather-bound journal. The handwriting belonged not to the icy matriarch, but to a 16-year-old girl, dreaming of escaping a dusty farm life for a bigger world. It was the first volume of her story, and it was waiting for me. That discovery changed everything. The test was not about endurance. It was about inheritance, not the money, but her life, her secrets, her truth. My grandmother had hidden a trail, and I had been chosen to follow it. The days in Blackwood Manor settled into a rhythm that was both grueling and strangely liberating. I woke with the dawn, when pale gray light filtered through the grimy windows and set the swirling dust aglow like faint constellations. My body, sore from sleeping on ancient furniture draped with moth-eaten linens, craved warmth and food. Survival became a daily ritual, and each necessity forced me to confront my own resilience. The fireplace became my closest ally. After hours of trial and error, I coaxed flame from brittle logs scavenged from the overgrown grounds. That first fire transformed the icy, oppressive silence into something almost bearable. I scavenged the gardens for wild berries and mushrooms, tasting each with cautious desperation, aware that one mistake could end the challenge before it truly began. Hunger made every discovery, every edible leaf, or crumb of forgotten grain feel like treasure. Yet it was not mere survival that shaped my days. It was the hunt for meaning. The jar of peaches had awakened something in me, a whisper that my grandmother had left more than cruel conditions. I combed every room with the eyes of an archaeologist, searching not only for sustenance but for clues. What had seemed like a prison revealed itself as a map. Her study was the first real breakthrough. Among shelves of heavy tomes on law and finance, I found the hollowed book that led to a hidden room. Inside, the air smelled of ink and secrets, and waiting on the desk was her journal, Volume 1. I read until my eyes burned. The entries were not the voice of the formidable titan who had terrified my childhood, but the dreams of a 16-year-old girl determined to escape a small town. She had ambition. Yes, but it was raw and hopeful, not yet hardened into steel. I realized in that moment that I had never known my grandmother at all. The journals became my sustenance as much as fire and food. Each discovery pulled me deeper into her hidden life, and each clue led me to another volume. In the nursery, I uncovered her tale of forbidden love with a penniless artist, a romance that ended in heartbreak so raw the pages were stained with tears. In the library, behind a loose brick, I found her account of reinvention, a woman clawing her way from grief into power, forging the Blackwood Empire with sheer will. The tone hardened, but between the lines, I sensed her loneliness. As I read, I felt less like a lost granddaughter and more like a chosen witness. I was not surviving the house. I was deciphering her, and in doing so, I was rewriting myself. Each journal gave me strength. By the second week, I no longer saw myself as weak. I could build a fire, forage for food, and endure the night's strange creaks and whispers without panic. When Marcus and Brenda arrived for their weekly inspections, expecting to find me defeated, they were greeted instead by a woman seated calmly by the fire, a leather-bound journal open on her lap. Their smug smiles faltered with every visit. They thought this was punishment. They could not see that it was initiation. The third week brought me to the most personal chapters of her life. I found entries about my own mother's birth, about doubts and regrets my grandmother had never spoken aloud. She confessed her failures as a mother, her obsession with success, her inability to balance love with ambition. It was a portrait of a woman far more complex than the cold matriarch I had feared. By then, I no longer dreaded the nights. The manor still groaned, the wind still howled, but I understood that its sounds were not threats, they were echoes. The house was alive with memory, and those memories had chosen me. As the 30th day drew near, I held 5 journals in my possession. They formed a mosaic of a life filled with brilliance, pain, ambition, and love denied. I had come to understand my grandmother not as a monster, but as a woman who had lived, erred, triumphed, and suffered. I had also come to understand myself not as a fragile girl drowning in student debt, but as someone capable of carrying her legacy. When the final inspection day arrived, Marcus and Brenda appeared dressed in designer coats, radiating smug certainty. They expected ashes. Instead, they found a fire, a stack of journals, and me standing strong. I invited them inside, my voice steady, my eyes unflinching. They believed my stillness was surrender. They had no idea it was triumph. They followed me into the drawing room, their expensive shoes leaving muddy streaks across the original hardwood. I did not rush to speak. Instead, I let their eyes settle on the stack of journals neatly arranged on the coffee table. Volumes 1 through 5. They were not grand, not gilded, just weathered leather books filled with handwriting. Yet the way my aunt and uncle stared at them, mouths slightly open, told me they sensed the weight they carried. I sat by the fire and gestured for them to join me. They perched stiffly, Brenda clutching her handbag as if it were armor, Marcus gripping his clipboard with unnecessary force. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then I opened the top journal and began to read aloud. Not passages of triumph, but secrets. I reminded Marcus of the childhood lie he had told when he broke a porcelain teacup and blamed the family dog. A story only my grandmother could have recorded. His face drained of color. Then I turned to Brenda, recounting how she once slipped her mother's heirloom necklace to wear at parties, desperate for admiration. Brenda's smile cracked, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. The journals were not just records, they were mirrors. My grandmother had written about their flaws with brutal honesty, and I was holding those truths in my hands. For the first time, they realized the house was not empty. It was crowded with memories, with their own ghosts. They had come expecting to claim money, but what they found was evidence that their mother had seen through them all along. I closed the journal softly and stood. Without a word, I walked to the fireplace, knelt, and pressed against a hidden latch. The panel clicked open, revealing the small safe I had discovered days earlier. Inside lay a single folded document, yellowed but official. I carried it back and handed it to Brenda. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it, scanning the words with growing horror. Marcus leaned over, his jaw tightening with each line. My grandmother's true will was clear: the fortune belonged to me, not conditionally, not as a game. The mansion test had been a passage, not a punishment. Their dream of inheriting millions evaporated in silence. But there was more. Attached to the will had been a sealed envelope addressed in my grandmother's familiar script, marked to be opened at the conclusion of the test. I had waited until now, with them watching. I broke the seal. The letter inside was long, written with deliberate care. Her voice emerged from the page, not harsh, but softened by age and regret. She congratulated me, not for surviving, but for understanding. She spoke of her own failings, of being a brilliant CEO but a flawed mother, of raising children who had learned to value money over meaning. And then she revealed her final condition. The estate, yes, was mine. But a portion of it was to establish the Blackwood Family Foundation, dedicated to the arts and preservation of history. And its leadership, she wrote, would fall to me. My aunt and uncle shifted, uneasy. Their names appeared in the letter as well. If they wished to receive their own generous yearly inheritance, they would be required to work under me, serving the foundation for 5 years, not as beneficiaries, but as builders. The silence that followed was electric. Brenda's lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. Marcus sat frozen, his business mind surely calculating the humiliation, the impossibility of refusing. My grandmother's brilliance was complete. She had not punished them with poverty, but tethered their greed to purpose. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the journals. The firelight flickered across their stunned faces. I felt no gloating triumph, only a quiet, steady strength. For the first time in my life, I was not the timid, overlooked granddaughter. I was the heir not only to wealth, but to story, to purpose, to legacy. And they knew it. Marcus was the first to speak. His voice, usually smooth and commanding, cracked with restrained fury. This can't be binding. It's manipulative. Mother wasn't in her right mind. I let him finish, then slid one of the journals toward him. Volume 4. I said quietly, written when she was at the peak of her career, building the empire you now live off. Read the clarity in her words. Read the contracts she drafted, the notes on mergers, the negotiations. Does that sound like a woman unfit to dictate her will? He didn't touch the journal. His fingers twitched, but he couldn't bring himself to open it. Brenda finally found her voice, though it came out sharp, brittle. So, what you expect us to play along to, work under you, after all we've done for this family. I almost laughed. You mean after all you've taken? Their eyes snapped to mine. The timid girl they once dismissed was gone, and they saw it. My voice carried a steadiness I hadn't known I possessed until that moment. This isn't my game, I continued, and it isn't yours. It's hers. She didn't just leave me her fortune, she left me her burden, and whether you like it or not, you're bound to it too. For a long time, none of us spoke. The fire crackled, the house groaned, and the weight of the Blackwood legacy pressed down on us all. At last, Marcus leaned back, eyes cold and calculating. Fine, we'll see if this foundation of yours even lasts a year. Brenda adjusted her pearls, her bitterness sharp enough to taste. Don't expect us to respect you. I smiled faintly, gathering the journals into my arms. I don't need your respect. I have hers. And that's enough. I left them in the drawing room, their anger festering in silence, while I carried the journals upstairs. Each one had been a trial, a clue, a lesson. They were more valuable to me than the estate itself. That night, as I lit candles in the study, I opened the final page of the last journal I had found. In it, my grandmother had written a single sentence, one that had been etched into my mind ever since. The fortune is not the house, nor the money, it is the fire you carry forward when all else has turned to ash. I closed the book slowly, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. The mansion was no longer a prison, no longer a haunted house of decay. It was a crucible, and I had come out forged, stronger than before. When dawn broke over the tangled gardens, I stood at the tall window, watching the light spill across the land that was now mine. The Blackwood name no longer felt like a weight. It felt like a beginning. And this time, I was not just surviving, I was leading.